everyone, and welcome to week 3 of COMM 335, Communication in Small Groups and Teams. I just wanted to provide this PowerPoint presentation for you to go over a little bit of week 2's assignments, talk about week 3, and then go over some of the course content. So once we complete week 3, there are some different aspects that you will have understood and that we will have gone over. So you will be able to identify 4 different listening styles. You will be able to compare and contrast culture and climate. You'll describe the relationships among group size, composition, climate, and productivity. You'll also compare verbal and nonverbal communication. We'll identify guidelines for interpreting verbal and nonverbal communication in small groups, plan and conduct effective task group meetings, and then apply critical analysis skills to your group project. Okay, so I wanted to start this off by just doing a little recap after grading your week 2 assignments. The main thing is to make sure that you are reading the assignments and the assignment tips that I provide in the announcements, and that you're answering all of the questions that are within. So there are very specific guidelines that I follow as I am grading these, and it's based on all of the questions that are built into the assignment. The other thing I want you to be careful about is both grammar and APA. So for all the papers that I write, use Grammarly.com. You have a free account because you're a student at Franklin. So I run all my papers through there and it catches a lot of things. I've also been seeing a lot of run-on sentences. So one way to catch those is to just read your paper out loud. And if your sentence is starting to sound too long and you're taking too many breaths to get through it, it's probably a run-on. So try to cut those down. Instead of using commas everywhere, look to see where you can put a period and start a new sentence. Now with APA, we have great resources at Franklin. So if you go to the library website and go into APA, you can actually download some sample student papers that are going to have the paper already formatted in APA style, and you can just use that as a template. So you should have, for all of your assignments that you submit, unless it tells you otherwise, you should have a title page. You should have the page number in the top right-hand corner of all of your pages. You should include in-text citations. This is another thing that I saw a lot of. If you use a direct quote, yes, obviously you're using an in-text citation, but even if you are summarizing something, if you are paraphrasing something, if you are paraphrasing a scene from a movie, you still should include an in-text citation for that, because those weren't your original thoughts or ideas. And then finally, you should have a references page. And one thing to think about is your references, all the sources that you have on there, there should be a corresponding in-text citation. All right, so for this week's assignments, and I did post some more details about these in the announcements, but you have 3 main assignments. So you have your nonprofit group project, the process and initial research. That's going to be worth 35 points. And that's going to be a discussion board post. And again, there's specific questions to answer. Again, you have your learning check, so that short quiz that's due on Wednesday. And then you have a paper. It's just like 2 to 3 pages written, but then also your title page and your references page. And you take a competency assessment, and then from that assessment, you look at what you're least competent in, and you're going to actually answer questions regarding those and how you can improve upon them. So like I was saying, you have this competency assessment. So after reviewing those competencies, just really think about this. So which did you see that you are currently exhibiting as you're working in your group project? And what feedback do your fellow group members have for you on their observations of your use of the competencies? So this is something that you can discuss as a part of your team, because it'll be good for your self-evaluation assignment towards the end of class. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about listening styles now. Everyone has a different way of listening, or kind of like reason that they are listening. So first I want to talk about people-oriented listeners, and within your textbook it calls this actually relational listening, and it's really exactly what it sounds like. So people who are this type of listener, they really understand people's emotions and feelings, so they are more empathetic, and so as you're talking they're going to be listening for those things. Next we have action-oriented listeners. And this could be thought of as analytical listening style. And so with analytical, you're going to really focus on facts before you reach a conclusion. So they really like well-organized information. Then we have the critical listening style, or the content-oriented listeners, and the book says that they would make good judges because they are really good at evaluating and figuring out if there are any inconsistencies. So they really like details and complex information as well, and going into the facts. And then finally we have time-oriented listeners, which can also be referred to as the task listening style. And that people want to get things done. So they want well-organized information that says, you know, what is happening. They don't want to listen to rambling. Again, that's that time-oriented. And they just want someone to communicate efficiently, so that you can stay on schedule and focus on your agenda and get things done. So there is no best style for working in a team. It's always good to have a mixture of styles, but this is something also to pay attention to and to understand about your teammates, because it can help, it can just help with your communication. So based on these, I want you to reflect on what you think your listening style is. So I will say for myself, I am a very analytical person. So I listen to facts and I try to solve things. But I don't make those judgments until I have all of the facts. So I'm likely to listen to I listen to the details, and I kind of put things in order, and I am good at task-oriented roles. So I know this, and this is what I know that I can contribute to a team. So then again, based on your readings and your experiences, what advice would you give your fellow group members on how to listen in a group? So some people need that relational listening style. They need someone to be empathetic. Other people are, you know, good at the facts, and so that's just another style. Other people are long-winded. So there's no good, bad, right, or wrong, but depending on the personalities within the team, there's a style that just works a little better. So now we're just providing you a guide to active listening, and none of this is going to be earth-shattering, but you know, stop what you're doing. Don't be multitasking as someone else is talking. Look at them, make eye contact, actually listen to them and what they're saying. Don't just nod your head. Ask questions. The best way to show that you are actually listening is if you ask questions about what you are hearing. Another thing that you'll hear or see people do is actually paraphrase the content or paraphrase the feelings. So one way to do this is, so if I'm understanding you correctly, I'm hearing you say, and then you paraphrase what the person just said. Or from your body language, what I'm sensing you are feeling is, and then paraphrase what you think they're feeling. So this just all shows that you are actively listening to your teammates. So there are different components to nonverbal communication. Obviously, it's anything that's coming from you that isn't the specific words that's coming out of your mouth. So something as simple as your body posture and your movement. So if someone is slouching down, you're probably thinking, oh, they're really not listening. Or if someone is fidgeting or looking around, that movement just shows that they might not be listening to you. I just mentioned this before, but making eye contact shows that someone is paying attention. And even facial expression. So sometimes the words that come out of someone's mouth don't match what their facial expression is. So nonverbal communication can really tell you a lot more sometimes than what verbal does. There's also spatial relationship, and this has to do with power, or it has to do with cultures. So if you mimic what another person is doing in terms of how far they're standing away from you or talking from you, that can really do a lot to build a relationship. We also have our personal appearance as part of nonverbal communication, and that is something like, you know, if you're going into a business meeting, you're probably going to be dressing business casual because that's just the tone of the meeting. You want to show people that you care. But if you are just hanging out at your house, you're probably not going to be there in a dress or a suit and tie. So those are just simple forms of nonverbal communication that we don't always think about. There's also use of time, and this is actually really important, especially when you are working with people from another culture. So I was taught, for instance, that to be on time is to be late, and to be early is to be on time. But my husband is Hispanic, and in their culture, being late is just kind of normal. You'll also see, for instance, if you're working with someone from Italy, that their dinner times are very, very late. And so if you show up to something early or suggest a dinner early, that just doesn't make sense to them. And again, there's no right or wrong with someone's idea of time or use of time, but it's something that you need to talk over so that everyone understands. And then the tone of voice. So we all know that, you know, if your parents were upset with you when you were little, or how you might act towards your children, you change the tone of voice if you're upset, or if you're happy, or if you're sad. All right. So now we're going to talk about the 5 major types of nonverbal behaviors. And the first one is going to be emblems. So they often replace actual spoken words. So for instance, one example of an emblem is to put your finger in front of your mouth and mouth shh, and that way people know to be silent. Or a hitchhiker raising his thumb, you know, that's nonverbal communication telling people that he needs a ride. Or a soldier's salute. So those are just different emblems that are forms of nonverbal communication. So we also have illustrators that accompany verbal messages. So you might, you know, do something like you raise your index finger in the air that really shows that you are determined or you're really making a point. Blinks of an eye or nods of a head or shift in a body can also accent messages. Next we have affect displays, which are displaying emotion. So your body, your faces, we just talked about this, those can really tell us if you are bored or if you're slouched down. That shows that you're really just not, you might not care about what is being said. We have regulators that control the flow of communication. So that can be something like eye contact. So if you're saying, if someone understands your regulators and you're ready to leave a party, you might give someone a look and they're like, oh, okay, that means that it's time to go. Or you might raise your hand just so that the person talking or leading a discussion knows that you would like to speak. And then finally we have adapters, which are what satisfy personal needs, and they help people adapt to their immediate environment. So just something as simple as shifting in a chair for more comfort. There are also things that people do with their own bodies. So you might scratch or bite your nails, twirl your hair, and that can show that you are nervous or upset. But those are just some other examples of nonverbal behaviors. Okay, so then we have these 3 dimensions of nonverbal meaning. So with immediacy, the definition is that behaviors that signal liking or attraction. So that could be something like you reach over and touch someone as you're talking to them. If you're really interested in what they're saying, you might lean forward and just make eye contact. There's also the dimension of power. So how can we communicate power? That might be something like I mentioned earlier with the amount of space that you use, or if you increase the distance between you and who you're communicating with. And then the final dimension is responsiveness. So how can we really communicate interaction? Again, this could be something like eye contact. It could be different vocal cues, verbal cues, or just something as simple as your facial expressions that shows that you are really interacting with the person that you're talking with. All right, so based on your readings and experiences, what's important about nonverbal communication in groups? And what if your team has virtual members? So this is something that, we're getting more accustomed to now that we use Zoom for so many meetings in our lives, and even just to communicate with our family members sometimes. But it's hard sometimes to really understand those nonverbal forms of communication because you're not right in front of a person. So that's something to think about and to really look out for when you are working with a team, especially when it is online. And so that's another reason too that I suggest as much as possible using your camera when you're having your meetings, because then you can see each other and you can get a little better feeling of those nonverbal indicators. Because if you don't, it just can block the flow of communication.